Prefect Theron had spent a lifetime designing the perfect predator, only to forget the one piece of biological code that overrode all others: loyalty. On the bridge of the Varnathi Syndicate flagship, the Crucible, silence was a commodity more valuable than the rare earth metals in its hull. It was a silence of absolute order, where the only sound was the subliminal hum of life support and the soft chime of a system reporting nominal status. Prefect Theron stood before the primary observation window, a sheet of flawless, transparent aluminum that looked out upon the star-dusted black. His people, the Varnathi, did not merely dislike chaos. They found it intellectually offensive. It was a failure of logic, a rounding error in the grand equation of the cosmos. And Theron's life's work was the ultimate expression of that philosophy, the creation of perfect, predictable order from the messy, contemptible chaos of biology. His reflection was a long, elegant silhouette against the starfield. Like all his kind, his skin was the color of slate, his form gracile, his eyes large, black, and pupilless, absorbing the light with an unnerving totality. His fingers, long and slender, were steepled before his face, a posture of serene contemplation that masked the immense pressure coiling in his gut. His superiors in the Syndicate Directorate were watching. The acquisition of the Solus Amper trade routes had been costly, and now upstart mining collectives and scavenger crews were beginning to nip at their profits, emboldened by the sheer size of the Outer Rim. They needed to be reminded of their place. They needed a demonstration of Varnathi superiority so profound it would crush the very idea of resistance before it could take root. Prefect, the ship's captain, a veteran whose face was a roadmap of a dozen campaigns, spoke with quiet deference. We are in position above the target designation Rustmouth. The asset is prepared for deployment. Theron did not turn. His gaze remained fixed on the scarred, pockmarked asteroid slowly rotating below. The target is not an asteroid, Captain. It is an infestation. A pocket of illogical, sentimental attachment to a worthless rock. These humans, they name the hovels. It is a symptom of their disease. He allowed himself a small, private sigh. Proceed with the initial bombardment. A show of force. Rattle their cage, but do not break it. The asset must have a proper stage for its debut. The captain gave a crisp nod. As you command. Theron's mind turned to his creation, Project Harrow, the culmination of a century of Varnathi genetic science. A creature born from a tantalizing mystery his people had uncovered decades ago. A derelict human probe, the UES Odyssey, found tumbling through the interstellar dark. Its databanks were mostly corrupted, but one file remained stubbornly intact. It was a biological survey containing incomplete genetic sequences for two of its homeworld's dominant life forms. The Varnathi, in their unassailable logic, interpreted the file's title, Terra's Apex Social Predators, and its paired entries as a literal blueprint for a single composite organism. They had taken the fragmented DNA of the human and the wolf, and believing them two halves of a whole, and filled in the gaps with their own biosynthetic scaffolding. The result was a weapon of terrifying power and, Theron believed, perfect obedience. He had promised the Directorate a predator that could pacify a continent. Today, he would prove it by breaking a single defiant asteroid settlement. The humans of Rustmouth were about to become a footnote in the grand logical history of the Varnathi Syndicate. The problem with industrial-grade thermal tape wasn't that it failed. It was that it held on with the desperate, all-consuming loyalty of a zealot, even when the alloy plating it was bonded to was screaming for a dignified death. Corbin Valentine, his welding torch spitting angry blue sparks, was trying to persuade a patch of it to let go. The station shuddered again, a deep, metallic groan, and vibrated up through the soles of his boots. The half-welded barricade he was constructing protested with a shriek of stressed metal. An entire squadron of Varnathi Syndicate corvettes was using their front door for target practice, and the station's alloy did not appreciate the persuasion.
JS, high ground. Watch our 6.
Sergeant Barrosolin's voice was a low growl that cut through the cacophony of alarms and distant explosions.
Corbin, weld faster. My grandmother knits faster, and she's been dead for 50 years.
Corbin didn't look up from his work. The sharp chemical scent of the superheated Durasteel and the acritic bite of burning insulation filled his helmet, a perfume he knew all too well. And your grandmother also didn't have to deal with 50 tons of condescending gray aliens trying to redecorate her living space with plasma cannons, Barra. He gave the weld another searing pass. Besides, this isn't welding. This is prayer with fire. A flicker of movement in the periphery. Jess, a slip of a girl who moved like a shadow with a grudge, was already halfway up a twisted gantry, her small frame disappearing into the superstructure above. She didn't reply. She rarely did. Her actions were her words, and they were always direct, economical, and final. Each movement was purposeful, a line drawn from thought to action without a wasted gesture. Grizz racked the charging handle of a heavy repeater, the sound of a percussive declaration of intent. The weapon was a brutal piece of ex-Alliance hardware, as stubborn and reliable as the woman holding it. Her face, framed by a shock of graying hair, was set in a grim line. Syndicate's not trying to kill. Not yet. They're making a point. Yeah, I got the point, Corbin muttered, flipping his welding mask up. He squinted at the main plaza of Rustmouth, the hollowed-out asteroid they called home. Through the shimmering containment field at the main viewport, he could see the sleek, gunmetal gray shapes of the Varnathi ships. And the point is, they're rich, we're not, and they think our recent success in the soulless amber trade is a disruptive market anomaly. I call it good business. Grizz grunted, slapping a fresh power pack in the repeater's housing. They call it an excuse to show off. As if on cue, the barrage stopped. The sudden absence of noise was a physical pressure, a vacuum that sucked the air from Corbin's lungs. Every creak of the stressed station, every distant drip of a ruptured pipe became unnervingly loud. It was the quiet of a predator that had cornered its prey, and was now deciding how to play with it. And now? Corbin asked, his hand instinctively going to the grip of the modified pulse pistol holstered on his thigh. Now, Grizz said, her eyes fixed on the suddenly silent Varnathi ships hanging in the black outside the station's main viewport. Comes the punchline. A new shape detached from the belly of the largest Varnathi cruiser. It wasn't a bomb or a torpedo. It was a drop pod, massive and black, shaped like a coffin for a giant. It plunged towards Rustmouth, its trajectory aimed squarely at the central plaza. Oh, hell, Corbin breathed. He knew what this was. A demonstration. The Varnathi didn't just want to crush Rustmouth. They wanted to make an example of it for every other upstart outpost in the Outer Rim. They wanted to film the execution. The pod hit with the force of a tectonic event. The entire asteroid station screamed, Duracrete cracking and lights flickering violently. It didn't explode, it just arrived. A monument to overwhelming force, planted right in the heart of their home. The silence returned, thick with dust and dread. The drop pod sat in the center of the plaza, a silent, monolithic threat. Small drones, no bigger than a human fist, detached from the Varnathi's ships and swarmed in through the shattered viewports, their single, glowing red lenses focused on the pod. Broadcast drones. They were here to make sure the whole sector got a front row seat. "Whatever's in there," Corbin said, his voice low. "They want everyone to see it. And let's give them a good show." Grizz replied, her knuckles white on the grip of her repeater. With a long, drawn-out hiss of depressurizing gas, the front of the pod split open, unfolding like the petals of some monstrous metal flower. For a moment, there was only darkness within. Then, 2 points of light ignited deep inside, burning with a cold blue fire. A low growl rumbled out, a sound that felt less like hearing and more like a physical vibration in the bones. It emerged from the darkness, and Corbin felt his blood run cold. It was a nightmare given form, a quadrupedal beast of a size that defied all terrestrial biology, easily as large as a heavy armored personnel carrier. 10 tons of biosynthetic material, its hide a layered composite of black plating that seemed to drink the ambient light, shifting and resettling over a musculature that glowed with a soft light, internal luminescence like embers deep in a forge. Its armor was thick and overlapping, like tectonic plates of polished obsidian. Its form was canine, a predator of terrifying scale. Its head was long and woven, but its eyes, those 2 points of cold blue fire, held a terrifying, calculating intelligence. This was no dumb animal. This was a weapon. Project Harrow. It lifted its head and let out a roar that was not animalistic. It was a sonic shockwave, a declaration of dominance that shattered the remaining windows in the plaza and sent a fresh shower of dust and debris raining down. The broadcast drones repositioned, getting a perfect angle. The beast head swiveled, its glowing eyes locking onto the small, defiant figures huddled behind their pathetic tape-and-weld barricade. It saw Corbin. It saw Grizz. It saw Jess perched silently on the gantry above, a small, curious ghost in the chaos. "Well, Sparky," Corbin murmured to himself, raising his pistol, "this has been a suboptimal day." With a scream of tearing metal, the beast charged. It didn't run, it flowed. Each stride of its powerful armored legs devoured the distance, the ground shaking with every impact. It was an avalanche of muscle and steel, a tidal wave of engineered fury. Corbin braced himself. Grizz leveled her repeater, and even Jess drew the twin vibro knives she favored. This was it. The end of the line, broadcast live to their enemies as a warning. The beast was 10 meters away, 5, a blur of black armor and terrifying speed. Corbin squeezed the trigger of his pistol, sending a bolt of blue plasma streaking toward. The shot hit the creature's shoulder plate and dissipated with a harmless sizzle, not even scratching the paint. Grizz's repeater unleashed a torrent of heavy kinetic slugs, each one ricocheting off the creature's armored hide with a series of percussive pings that sounded comically ineffective. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution. Then, something that defied all expectation occurred. The beast, a living engine of destruction, dug its massive claws into the Duracrete floor. It skidded to a halt, just 2 meters from the barricade. The shriek of metal on stone, deafening. It stood there, panting, its breath coming in hot, vaporous clouds. Its head lowered, its nostrils, flared and wide, twitched. It was processing something. A storm of scents was hitting it. The sharp scent of discharged slugs from Griss's rifle, the hot metal air from Corbin's plasma shot, the dusty redolence of the station, the coppery scent of human sweat and fear. But beneath all that, carried on the recycled air, was something else. Something older, deeper. A scent pattern that resonated not in its memory, but in the very core of its genetically coded being. It was the scent of humanity. Unfiltered, primal, the scent of its makers. The scent of its true alphas. The beast's glowing blue eyes, which had been burning with cold, predatory fire, flickered. A new light entered them. Not hate, not hunger, confusion, recognition. It looked at Corbin, whose heart was trying to hammer its way out of its ribcage. It looked at Grizz, whose finger was still frozen on the trigger of her weapon. It looked at Jess, who had not moved a muscle, her expression one of tense, unwavering curiosity. Then, with a movement that was shockingly slow and deliberate for a creature of such power, it bent its powerful forelegs. The joints hissed, the armor plate shifted, and to the utter, jaw-dropping shock of the three humans and the silent, abject horror of the Varnathi watching from their orbiting command ship, Project Harrow knelt. It lowered its massive head until its snout was nearly touching the floor, a posture of absolute instinctual submission. It had been unleashed as the ultimate predator to intimidate a galaxy. Instead, it found its pack. On the pristine, minimalist bridge of the Crucible, Prefect Theron watched the live feed on the main view screen. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound on the bridge was the quiet, ambient hum of the ship's systems as every officer stared, frozen at the image of their creation, bowing to a trio of what his culture deemed unevolved organisms. Theron's composure was a mask of ice, but a fissure of pure, undiluted fury was cracking it from within. This was not a malfunction. This was a humiliation. An illogical, emotional, biological catastrophe. His perfect weapon, the culmination of all his work, was acting like a misbehaving pet. "Terminate the broadcast," he said. His voice was dangerously calm, each word a chip of ice. "All channels, now." The comms officer scrambled to comply, his gray fingers flicking across the touch-sensitive surface, keying in the sequence to sever the broadcast feed. The red live indicators across the bridge flickered and died. Theron turned his head slowly, his gaze falling upon the ship's captain. "This demonstration," he stated, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more menacing than any shout, "is now a sterilization operation. I want my asset back, and I want the human contaminants purged." The captain, a veteran, hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Prefect, our orders were for a non-lethal demonstration." "Your orders have changed, Captain," Theron interrupted, rising from his command chair. He walked to the view screen, placing a hand on the cool glass right over the image of the kneeling beast. "This display of sentimentality is a flaw in the asset's programming, an unforeseen variable introduced by the source material. It cannot be allowed to propagate. No trace of his failure can be permitted to exist. Deploy the commando teams. Retrieve the asset. Eliminate all witnesses." He tapped the screen. "And bring me the humans, alive if possible. I wish to dissect the nature of this anomaly personally." His professional pride, the very core of his Varnathi identity, had been wounded. He would not just erase his failure. He would dissect it, understand it, and ensure it never happened again. The humans of Rustmouth were no longer a nuisance. They were a research project. Back in the plaza, the three humans stared, mouths agape. The silence was broken by Jess, who gracefully dropped from the gantry, landing as silently as a cat. She walked forward past the barricade, her steps slow but sure.
Jess, get back here!
Corbin hissed, his voice tight with disbelief and fear. She ignored him. She approached the colossal, kneeling beast, stopping just before its lowered head. She reached out a small, grimy hand and placed it on the creature's armored snout, right between its glowing eyes. The beast did not flinch. Instead, a low, guttural rumble vibrated from its chest. Not a growl, but a purr. A sound of contentment, so deep it shook the floor. It nudged its head gently into her palm, a gesture of profound affection. Grizz lowered her repeater, an expression of dawning incredulous awe on her face.
Well, I'm B, she breathed. It's a giant armored space puppy.
The tender moment was shattered by the hiss of rappelling lines and the clatter of armored boots. Vernathi commandos, clad in sleek black combat shells and armed with pulse carbines, began descending into the plaza from breaches in the ceiling. They moved with cold, synchronized purpose, each member of the fire team covering another's advance.
Spoke too soon,
Corbin gritted out.
Company's here.
Grizz snapped back into tactical mode. She pointed a decisive finger at the beast, which was now lifting its head, a low growl of rising anger directed at the newcomers.
All right, big guy,
she barked, her voice ringing with command authority.
New name's Wrecker. You see those shiny black suits? They're not us.
She jabbed her finger toward the commandos.
Sick 'em.
It was as if a switch had been flipped. The beast, Wrecker, surged to its feet with a deafening metallic roar. The sound was different from its first cry of dominance. This was a deep, guttural sound of protective fury. Its pack was being threatened. It launched itself at the nearest squad of Vernathi commandos. It was no longer a patient, stalking predator. It was a whirlwind of claws and armor plate. A commando raised his carbine, but Wrecker's armored forelegs smashed him into the wall with the force of a freight train. Another was snatched up in its immense jaws and tossed like a child's toy in a far bulkhead. Plasma fire sparked and deflected off its hide, and it tore through their ranks a living, breathing anti-infantry weapon system that had just chosen a side.
Okay,
Corbin said, shouldering his own pulse rifle.
New plan. I'm starting to like the new plan.
He glanced at Grizz.
To the ship?
Grizz grinned, a fierce, wolfish expression.
To the ship.
Their retreat became a storm of calculated violence. With Wrecker acting as a living, roaring battering ram, the path to the hangar bay was significantly clearer. Vernathi commandos, trained for lethal, logical combat, were utterly unprepared for a 10-ton bioweapon with a sudden and violent case of loyalty. They expected flanking maneuvers and covering fire, not a creature that could simply run through a reinforced bulkhead as if it were tissue paper.
Heel, Wrecker!
Grizz yelled as they sprinted down a wide maintenance corridor, Wrecker trotting obediently at her side, occasionally snapping at a Vernathi soldier who got too close. The beast had to turn sideways to fit, its armored flanks scraping sparks from the walls.
You're telling me that thing fits in the rust bucket?
Corbin panted, trying to keep up.
Ship was built to haul dense irradiated salvage. Reinforced deck, oversized bay. It'll fit. It won't be comfortable.
There is nothing comfortable about this. They burst into the hangar bay where the ship, the Rust Bucket, was docked. It wasn't pretty. It was a repurposed salvage tug, a patchwork of different manufacturers' parts held together by Corbin's mechanical genius and a worrying amount of hope. But it was tough, and its cargo bay was, as Grizz said, oversized and reinforced.
Jess, prep the pre-flight. I'll lower the ramp.
Corbin yelled, sprinting to the ship's external access panel. As the heavy ramp of the Rust Bucket slammed down, more commandos flooded the hangar, taking up positions and laying down suppressing fire. Bolts of red plasma sizzled past Corbin's head.
Wrecker, cover us!
Grizz commanded, providing her own covering fire with the repeater. Wrecker needed no encouragement. It charged into the open hangar, becoming the galaxy's largest and most distracting target. The commandos focused their fire on the beast, their plasma shots creating a brilliant but ineffective light show against its armor. This gave Corbin and the others the opening they needed.
Everyone on!
Corbin shouted, scrambling up the ramp. Jess was already in the cockpit, flicking physical switches and tracing patterns in the main screen to bring the old engines to life. Grizz followed, dragging a crate of spare power cells with her.
Wrecker, on the boat, now!
Grizz bellowed. The beast, seeing its pack was safely aboard, disengaged from the firefight with a final, contemptuous swipe that sent 2 commandos flying and bounded up the ramp. The entire ship groaned and listed to one side under the sudden shift in mass, but the reinforced structure held. Wrecker barely fit, his armored back scraping the ceiling of the cargo bay as Corbin slammed the activation switch.
Hang on to something.
Jess's voice, a rare and welcome sound, crackled over the ship's internal comm. The Rust Bucket's engine roared to life, not with the elegant hum of a Syndicate vessel, but with the coughing, gut-vibrating rumble of an overworked mule. The ship lurched forward, blasting free of its docking clamps. Corbin stumbled into the cargo bay just as the ramp sealed. Wrecker was standing there, its massive frame taking up most of the space, its head cocked curiously.
All right, big guy,
Corbin said, panting and grabbing a set of heavy-duty magnetic clamps from the wall.
Let's get you strapped in before you decide to redecorate.
The beast offered no resistance, allowing Corbin to secure its legs to the deck plating. As the Rust Bucket cleared the station and jumped to hyperspace, leaving a very confused and decimated Varnathi boarding party behind, Corbin leaned against the bulkhead, looking at the giant, armored wolf thing in his cargo bay, and allowed himself a single, exhausted laugh. The low, gut-vibrating hum of the hyperdrive was a comforting sound, a confirmation that they were, for the moment, safe. Corbin was running a systems diagnostic in the cockpit, the sharp chemical scent from the overworked drive still lingering in the recycled air. Grizz was chugging a nutrient paste that smelled vaguely of chicken and regret, while Jess was in the cargo bay with their new passenger.
She's been down there for an hour,
Grizz noted, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand.
Think he ate her?
Wrecker wouldn't eat Jess, Corbin said without looking up from his console. He might try to groom her, which would be infinitely more terrifying. He tapped a few commands.
Ship's holding together. Barely.
They did a number on the port stabilizer. A moment later, Jess appeared in the cockpit doorway. She was holding a small data chip.
Found something,
she said, her voice quiet. Corbin swiveled in his chair.
Found what? Where?
Jess pointed a thumb back toward the cargo bay.
Under the armor, a seam. Diagnostic port.
Corbin and Grizz exchanged a look. Of course, Jess, with her scavenger's eyes, would find a hidden maintenance port on a 10-ton biological war machine, while everyone else was still processing the fact that it existed. They followed her back to the cargo bay. Wrecker was lying down, its massive head resting on its paws. It watched them approach with its intelligent blue eyes, giving another one of its floor-shaking purrs when Jess patted its leg. She pointed to a nearly invisible seam just behind its shoulder plate.
Pried it open,
she whispered, indicating the panel she'd found. Corbin knelt, plugging his personal datapad into the exposed port.
All right, let's see what makes you tick, Sparky.
The screen lit up with a wall of text, a cascade of Varnathi military-grade encryption that made Corbin's eyes water.
Scrap. This is layered deeper than a core world politician's conscience. It'll take me weeks to crack this.
As he spoke, Wrecker lifted his head. It watched Corbin's frustrated tapping for a moment, then let out a soft whine. He nudged Corbin's datapad with its enormous snout, the gesture surprisingly gentle. Then it nudged a specific, unassuming maintenance console built into the cargo bay wall, a console used for calibrating the magnetic clamps.
What?
Corbin asked, looking from the beast to the console.
You want me to use that?
Wrecker nudged the console again, more insistently, then looked back at the datapad. Grizz folded her arms.
It's a pack animal, Corbin. It's trying to help. It's not a dog. It's a whatever it is.
Corbin muttered, but he unplugged his datapad and connected it to the indicated console. He ran a diagnostic. The console wasn't just for the clamps, it was a redundant systems hub tied into the ship's main computer. And for some reason, the Varnathi port was reacting to it. A new window opened on his datapad, a back door into the encryption. No way, Corbin breathed. It's using the ship's architecture as a skeleton key. He started typing furiously as the data streams began to flow, corrupted and fragmented, but readable. He pulled up the first coherent file. It was a header, simple and stark. Project Harrow, Source Data, Archival Probe UES Odyssey, Human Origin. Another file, a classification manifest from the human probe, flickered onto the screen. It was written with a strange, poetic flourish that was completely at odds with typical military classification. Master File, Terra's Apex Social Predators, Subentries, Homo sapiens canis lupus. Archivist note. Let the record show that while we stand on two legs and they on four, we are bound by the same ancient pact. The warmth of fire, the loyalty of the pack, the thrill of the hunt. In our arrogance, we call them beast and ourselves man, but the wolf that runs in the dark of the wood runs also in the dark of our own hearts. They are our shadow kin, our other half, the song of the wild that we have almost forgotten how to sing. Corbin stared at the screen. Grizz leaned over his shoulder, reading. Apex Social Predators? One file? The final fragment was a Varnathi project note, cold and clinical. Genetic interpretation, single organism, incomplete sequences for both subentries, missing data compensated with Varnathi biosynthetic scaffold, intelligence and pack loyalty of human combined with predatory instinct of wolf. The horrifying, hilarious, galaxy-altering truth crashed down on them. The Varnathi, in their cold, emotionless logic, had found a derelict human probe. They found a file created by some long-dead, overly dramatic archivist and taken it literally. They thought humans and wolves were two parts of the same creature. With incomplete DNA for both, they had simply filled in the blanks. They had built their ultimate weapon, using a human and a wolf as the blueprint, believing it was one organism. Corbin looked from the datapad to the giant, armored wolf creature that had knelt before them. The creature that was, genetically speaking, their weird, monstrous cousin. Oh, Corbin said, a slow grin spreading across his face. Oh, you magnificent, logical morons. The Hunter needed a tune-up first. The rust bucket was bleeding coolant from a plasma score along its port engine, and the stabilizer was still shot to hell. Pushing the hyperdrive in this condition was suicide. We need parts, Corbin announced, pulling up a regional map. And there's only one place in this sector that'll have what we need without asking questions a priest would blush at. He tapped the destination on the map, a small, pockmarked moon orbiting a dying gas giant. Its official designation was XT-734. Everyone in the rim just called it the Grinder. The Grinder was less a moon and more a scrapyard with its own gravity. The surface was a mountain range of wrecked starships, a graveyard of forgotten wars and failed business ventures. The only settlement was a shanty town built into the metallic husk of a derelict dreadnought, run by a syndicate of scavengers known as the Grinders. Landing the rust bucket was a delicate affair. Corbin found a relatively stable plateau of compressed freighter hulls and set them down. The air tasted of rust and lubricant. All right, Corbin said, grabbing a bag of tools and a few high-density credit chips. Grizz, you're with me. Jess, you stay here. Keep an eye on our boy and the ship. If anyone but us tries to get on board, you have my permission to get creative. Jess just grinned and tapped the hilt of one of her vibro knives. It was all the confirmation he needed. The bartering in Grinder's central market was a tense, ritualistic dance. Corbin, a master of deadpan haggle, argued with a four-armed, cybernetically enhanced grinder chief over the price of a refurbished plasma conduit, while Grizz stood silently behind him, her sheer imposing presence a form of negotiation all its own. This conduit has a microporosity rating of .03. It'll leak like a sieve under full load. The grinder chief chittered, his metallic arms crossing over his chest.
.015, human, and that's my final offer. Take it or go weld your ship with mud and hope.
They eventually settled on a price that felt only slightly like grand larceny. Hours blurred into a rhythm of grime and sparks. Corbin, cursing under his breath as he wrestled the new conduit into place, felt a familiar frustration with a roll of industrial thermal tape that refused to yield. Jess, a ghost in the machine's guts, rerouted the frayed power lines with a quiet focus. While Corbin's back was turned to grab a hydro spanner, Jess's hand darted out, snatching the same stubborn roll of hyperconductive thermal tape from his kit. She planned it with a silent, sly grin before he turned back, none the wiser. In the cargo bay, the clang of Grizz's thrown decoy drone was followed by Wrecker's immediate pounce, a 10-ton beast learning the art of restraint. She wasn't training a pet, she was drilling a soldier. She used sharp, clear hand signals, a closed fist for stay, a pointed finger for watch, a slashing motion for attack. Wrecker responded with stunning speed and comprehension, his intelligent eyes locked on her. The bond between the no-nonsense soldier and the bioengineered beast was solidifying, built on a shared language of tactical purpose.
He's a fast learner,
Grizz said, giving Wrecker's armored flank an approving slap as Corbin emerged from the engine room covered in grease.
They better be,
Corbin replied, wiping his forehead.
as we're about to go kick the hornet's nest. Prefect Theron is a creature of ego,
Corbin explained, pacing the rust bucket's small bridge. The star map glowed between them.
We can't just show up at a secret lab. Even if we knew where it was, the place will be a fortress. We need to draw him out. We need to insult him on a professional level.
He pointed to a major trade route on the map, a pulsing green line.
The Solus Amber lanes. The Varnathi control them. Solus Amber isn't just for getting high. It's a vital component in 90% of modern hyperdrives. If the Varnathi lose control of these lanes, their entire fleet becomes a collection of very expensive paperweights.
Grizz nodded, catching on.
So, we hit them where their pride and their profit margins intersect.
Exactly, Corbin said.
We're gonna hijack one of their high-value amber freighters. But we're not just going to steal the spice. He grinned. We're gonna steal their secrets. And we're gonna do it with Wrecker, making sure everyone sees it.
Their target was a lumbering, heavily automated Varnathi freighter, the Gilded Hand. It was slow, arrogant, and flying with a skeleton crew. The rust bucket dropped out of hyperspace directly in its path. The attack was brutally direct. Grizz took out the freighter's engines with a precise volley, and Corbin brought them in close.
Wrecker, you're up!
Grizz shouted into the comm. The cargo bay doors slid open. Wrecker took a running leap across the void, a living, boarding torpedo that slammed onto the Gilded Hand's hull with a deafening screech. He tore his way to the bridge, and the terrified Varnathi crew surrendered instantly. While Grizz and Jess secured the spice, Corbin went straight for the bridge's secure data terminal. He plugged in his datapad and, using the exploit they discovered, downloaded a secure Varnathi fleet data slate. This was the real prize. Back on the rust bucket, Corbin went to work. The data slate was a treasure trove. It contained master encryption keys, fleet movements, and, most importantly, a list of coordinates for several deep space Varnathi black sites.
One of these has to be Theron's lab,
Corbin said, projecting the list onto the star map.
There were 5 possible locations, all in uncharted hostile territory. But which one? Attacking the wrong one will get us killed.
As he spoke, Wrecker, who had been lying quietly in the cargo bay, grew agitated. He padded onto the bridge, a low whine rumbling in his chest. He walked to the glowing star map and stared at it, his head cocked.
Then he lifted a claw and scratched at one specific blinking coordinate in a dark, nebular cluster. "Hey, easy on the console." Corbin started, but then he froze. Wrecker whined again, scratching the same point, more insistently this time. He looked at Corbin, then back at the coordinate. A look of profound recognition in his intelligent eyes. Corbin's eyes widened. "That's it," he breathed. "The slate gave us the possibilities. He's giving us the answer." He looked at the others, a wild, reckless sense of purpose igniting in his chest. They weren't guessing anymore. The hunter had the scent of its master. They leaked footage of their tamed monster and the hijacked spice to every news broker in the Outer Rim. The message was clear. The Varnathi's ultimate weapon was now working for a trio of human upstarts. Theron would be professionally and personally humiliated. He would have no choice but to come for them. Prefect Theron did not take the news well. The image of his creation, posing like a trophy hunter's prize next to a human soldier, was an insult of such magnitude that it transcended mere professional failure. It was a personal, visceral affront to his logic, his genius, and his species' perceived superiority. "He is mocking me," Theron whispered to his captain, his black eyes fixed on the image of Wrecker. "That human, Valentine, he has broadcast my failure to the entire sector. He is using my own creation to dismantle my reputation." He grew perfectly, terrifyingly still. "This is no longer about retrieval. This is about intellectual extermination." He turned, his face a mask of cold fury. "He has our black site coordinates. I know which one he will choose. The asset will lead him there. Prepare the Crucible for immediate departure. Plot a course for Thanatos Nebula."
"Sir,"
the captain said,
"we'll be jumping into an unscouted sector."
"The sector is not empty," Theron corrected him. "My primary research facility is there, and now so is my prey." He allowed himself a thin, cruel smile. "The human thinks he has set a trap. He has merely chosen the location of his own dissection." On the rust bucket, an alarm blared. "Massive energy signature dropping out of hyperspace," Grizz announced from the sensor station. "It's a big one, Corbin. Cruiser class. Varnathi." Corbin looked at the screen where friendly ships were marked as green icons and the enemy was a large, advancing red triangle. A single, enormous ship icon appeared, right where Wrecker had indicated, right where Theron's mobile lab, the Crucible, would be. "He took the bait," Corbin said, a thrill running through him. "All hands, battle stations, full power to forward shields." Jess, already in the pilot seat, pushed the throttle forward. The rust bucket, patched up and battle-ready, accelerated, flying not away from the giant Varnathi warship, but straight towards it.
"They're not changing course,"
the Varnathi tactical officer reported, his voice laced with confusion.
They're accelerating on a direct collision course."
Prefect Theron watched the tiny blip of the rust bucket on the main screen. Arrogance. A fatal human flaw. He turned to his weapons officer. "Target their engines. Disable them. I want that ship intact." On the rust bucket, the ride was getting bumpy as the first volley of warning shots from the Crucible bracketed them.
"They're trying to cripple us,"
Grizz yelled over the noise.
"I know."
Corbin shouted back, his eyes glued to the schematics of the Crucible from the stolen slate.
"Jess, see that dorsal heat vent? Sector 7.
Jess's hands moved over her console, highlighting the area. She gave a short nod.
"On my mark, I need you to hit it with a full burst from the forward cannons. It'll cause a feedback loop and temporarily disable the atmospheric shielding for the main hangar bay. For about 5 seconds.
Grizz's eyes widened. "You want to fly into the hangar?" "I don't want to fly into it," Corbin said with a manic grin. "I want to park in it." He looked at Jess. "Ready?" She gave him a thumbs up.
"Mark!"
The rust bucket shuddered as its forward cannons fired. The plasma bolt struck the heat vent, and on the Varnathi bridge an alarm blared.
Atmospheric shield in the main hangar's flickering, Prefect!
With a deafening shriek of protesting metal, the reinforced chassis of the salvaged tug slammed into the now vulnerable hangar bay opening. The impact shuddered through the crucible's frame, the force of the ramming action cracking primary support struts and severing main power conduits deep within the ship's structure near the reactor housing. The rust bucket slid halfway into the massive hangar before grinding to a halt, wedged tight. Corbin was already up, grabbing his pulse rifle.
Welcome to the party, pal!
He yelled, the ramp slammed down, and the three humans, followed by a roaring wrecker, charged into the pristine white hangar of the most advanced research vessel in the Outer Rim. The fight was on. Prefect Theron was waiting for them in the main genetics laboratory. He stood in the center of the vast circular chamber, calm and composed, flanked by his elite guard. He looked not at the humans, but at Wrecker.
Fascinating, Theron said. The loyalty programming latched onto the most primitive, emotionally volatile subjects. A flaw, certainly, but an instructive one. He finally deigned to look at Corbin. You think you have exposed a weakness in my work, human. You have merely confirmed a hypothesis I predicted long ago.
He gestured to a large, covered shape behind them.
Biology is messy, unpredictable. That is why Project Harrow was always just one half of the equation.
He pulled the covering away. Standing there was another predator, Harrow 2. Sleek, robotic, and utterly without life. Its chassis polished chrome and black carbon fiber, its eyes cold red optical sensors.
My parallel program, Project Chimera, is the destination, Theron sneered. Pure, unfeeling, obedient logic. It possesses all of Harrow's strengths and none of his pathetic weaknesses. He tapped a command on his wrist-mounted controller. Harrow 2, activate. Decommission the biological contaminants.
The robot activated. It was Wrecker's nightmare sibling. The battle was a symphony of instinct versus logic. Harrow 2 was a flawless killing machine. Wrecker was a storm of primal cunning.
Grizz, suppress those guards. I need a clear shot at the control interface on his wrist.
Corbin yelled, laying down plasma bolts toward the prefect. Grizz's repeater roared, forcing Theron and his guards to dive for cover. But the robot was relentless, its chrome claws scoring deep gashes in Wrecker's armor.
Its shields are eating my slugs!
Grizz yelled, reloading.
Jess, find me a power source!
High above, clinging to a network of power conduits, Jess saw it. The thick, armored cable running from a large power junction directly into Harrow 2's back, feeding its shield emitter. She pulled the roll of industrial thermal tape from her belt. Harrow 2 had Wrecker pinned, a high-frequency blade extending from its jaws.
Jess!
Corbin screamed. A small, dark shape dropped from the ceiling. Jess landed silently on the power junction. With a speed born of 1,000 similar actions, she ripped off a long strip of the hyperconductive thermal tape and slammed it across 2 exposed terminals. Sparks erupted, a massive power surge, with nowhere to go thanks to primary conduits, severed during their violent arrival, cascaded directly into the ship's already strained reactor containment field. Alarms blared across the ship. On the floor, the power feed to Harrow 2's shield emitter shorted out. For a single, critical second, its energy field died.
Wrecker! Now! The neck joint!
Corbin yelled. Wrecker lunged upward, his massive jaws closing around Harrow 2's unshielded neck. There was a horrific screech of twisting metal, and Wrecker tore the robot's head clean off. It clattered to the floor and rolled to a stop at Theron's feet. The headless body of Harrow 2 crumpled. Wrecker stood over it, panting and victorious. A high-pitched alarm screamed through the lab. The crucible was tearing itself apart. Theron stared at the severed head of his masterpiece.
You primitives. You broke my toys!
He never finished.
Grizz strode forward and delivered a single economical punch to his jaw. The prefect crumpled in an unconscious heap.
Less talking, more leaving.
She grunted, scooping up his pulse rifle.
Back to the ship!
Corbin commanded. They raced through the shaking corridors, scrambled aboard the rust bucket, and jazzed through the engines into full reverse. With a groan of tortured metal, the salvage tug ripped itself free from the hangar. They blasted away just as the crucible imploded, its silent, graceful destruction a testament to their victory. The shockwave hit them, sending them tumbling through space, but the tough little hull held firm. Adrift, but alive, the crew took stock. The ship was a wreck, but they were victorious. In the cargo bay, Jess was patching up Wrecker with biofoam. On the bridge, Grizz was field-stripping her new rifle. Corbin stood before the navigation console, looking at the star map. They were no longer just scavengers. They were legends. Wrecker, patched up, padded onto the bridge. He walked over to Corbin and nudged his hand, a low purr rumbling in his chest. Corbin looked down at the bioengineered predator, the walking, breathing symbol of an empire's greatest mistake. A mistake that was now their greatest asset. He was family. Corbin grinned, a real, genuine grin, and patted Wrecker's armored head. All right, Wrecker. Where to next?